Have you ever asked AI to create something, watch it finish in seconds, and thought, this looks fine, but then, after looking more closely, you realize, this is not what I want at all. Maybe it creates a professional-looking presentation that completely missing the strategic point. Maybe it designed an analytical solution that answered the question but did not help anyone make decision. Maybe it produced a detailed implementation plan for a project that should never ever been implemented in the first place. For a long time, we blamed the model. We blamed the AI. We said the AI is not smart enough yet. But as AI becomes more capable, the explanation is becoming less convincing. Increasingly, the AI is not the main bottleneck. The real bottleneck is our ability to explain what we want, to identify what we have not decided, and to recognize what we do not yet understand. And that leads to a much bigger opportunity. The most valuable use of AI is not simply getting answers faster. It is using AI to discover the questions, the assumptions, and the methodologies you did not know were missing. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Celine Xu. I help business professionals and organizations make smart decisions about AI and AI adoption, so technology creates real value instead of risk. Let's dive in. More than 12 years working with data, analytics, and AI from several different perspectives, I have seen one pattern repeatedly. Most projects do not fail because the team lack of technology capability. They fail because the team starts with an incomplete understanding of the problem. They confuse the initial request with the real business need. They automate a process before asking whether the process should be redesigned. Or they build exactly what stakeholder request, only to discover that the stakeholder could not fully articulate what they needed. AI can help us solve those problems when we stop treating it as a machine that simply executes instruction. We can use it as a partner for discovering our unknowns. Section 1. The map and the territory. Think of the instructions you give AI as a map. The map contains everything you explicitly communicated. Your objective, your data, your constraints, your preferred approach, your defined success. But the real project is about territory. And the territory always contains more than the map. It contains unspoken expectations, political realities, undocumented process, historical failure, conflicting incentive, data limitations, stakeholders' preference, and methodology that nobody on the team has considered. Whenever AI reaches a part of territory that's missing from your map, it has to make a decision. It has to guess, and the guess may be completely reasonable. It may follow an industry best practice. It may choose the most common framework. It may replicate the approach used to be right by similar companies. But reasonable does not necessarily mean right for your situation. Imagine a business asks AI, help us build an AI-powered sales assistant. The AI can immediately produce feature, architecture, workflow, and an implementation roadmap. But what if the real sale problem is not access to the information? What if the real problem is poor account prioritization, inconsistent sales management, weak customer segmentation, bad incentives, or a product proposition that customers simply do not understand? AI can help you build the sales assistant, but unless you first explore the unknowns, it may help you professionally execute the wrong methodology. Section 2. The four-quadrant metric layout of knowledge. A useful way to understand this is by dividing knowledge into four categories: no knows, no unknowns, unknown knows, and unknown unknowns. First, no knows. These are the things you understand and you can clearly explain. For example, you know the company wants to increase sales productivity. You know which team will use the solution. You know which data sources are available. You know the budget and the timeline. No-knows usually appear naturally in your system design or the prompts. They are the visible part of the map. Second, no unknowns. These are things you know you have not figured out yet. You may not know whether the CRM data is reliable. You may not know how much time salespeople spend search for information. You may not know whether user will trust AI-generated recommendations. You know this question exists. You simply do not have the answer yet. And you're aware there are uncertainties due to those unanswered questions. 3. Unknown knows. These are things you understand intuitively but have never articulated. A sales leader might instantly recognize a high-quality opportunity but struggle to explain the exact criteria how he identified it. An investment professional may have an intuitive sense that a management team is credible even when the judgment cannot be quantified. Or an experienced analyst may immediately see an insight is commercially irrelevant, although the dashboard technically looks correct. This knowledge exists, but it lives in people's experience, instincts, and informal practice. AI cannot constantly reproduce criteria that nobody has put them into words. 4. Unknown unknowns. These are most dangerous and the most valuable ones. They are the risk you did not think to investigate, the method you did not know existed, the question an expert from another discipline would immediately ask but you do not even know, the alternative framing that could completely change the direction of the project you didn't even aware of. For example, your team has assumed the supply planning request the most is the predictive analytics, but perhaps the more appropriate angle is process mining, or causal analysis, or a change in operating model or decision process, or simply redesign the data pipeline using real-time calculation. You cannot ask a methodology you do not know exists, but AI can help you discover it. That's the shift. Do not only ask AI, what's the answer? Ask, what am I missing that could change the answer? 3. Why better prompts are not enough. A lot of AI advice focuses on writing more detailed prompts. Assign a role, add more context, define the specific format, provide step-by-step instruction. This is useful when you already understand the problem and the correct methodology. But more detailed instructions can also make something worse. When you are extremely specified, AI may follow your chosen direction even when a wrong approach would be better. You told AI how to execute, but you have not given AI permission to question whether the plan makes sense. At another extreme, if you are too vague about the instruction, AI fills the gap with generic assumptions and standard best practice. So you fail in both directions. Too much specificity can lock AI into wrong methodology. Too little specificity allows it to invent one for you without you knowing. The answer is not simply more prompting. It is structured exploration. You need to explain your current thinking while keeping the methodology open for challenge. Tell AI what you believe. Tell it why you believe it. Explain your experience level. Describe what has already been tried. Separate genuine constraints from assumptions and explicitly ask it to identify where you understand may be incomplete. The goal is not hand AI a perfect map. The goal is ask AI to help you to find out what are not on the map. Here is a practical 6-step process you can use before launching any significant AI, analytic, ML project. The process is map, scan, interview, compare, prototype, and validate. Step 1. Map your current understanding. Start by giving AI your real start point. Do not pretend the problem is more mature than it is. Explain what you know, what you suspect, what you have tried, and where your confidence is low. For example, imagine I'm supporting a company that wants to improve customer retention. A weak request would be, help us create a customer churn model. That immediately assumes predicting model is the right methodology. A strong start point would be, we are trying to improve customer retention in a subscription model. Leadership believe a churn prediction model may help, but we have not confirmed whether the main problem is identify at-risk customers, selecting effective interventions, or execute retention actions consistently. We have customer usage, service, contract, and commercial data, but data quality varies. Help us examine the problem before select a methodology. That changed the role of AI. It is no longer being asked to execute assumed solution. It is being asked to examine whether the assumption is valid and provide more possibility. Step 2. Run a blind spot scan. Next, ask AI to identify what you may be overlooking. From my perspective as someone who has worked across data science, strategy consulting, private equity, and industry analytics, I would ask AI to examine the situation through several lenses. For example, review this initiative from the perspective of business value, decision process, data readiness, user adoption, technical feasibility, governance, incentives, and operational model. Identify the assumption each type of expert would challenge and highlights unknowns that could change the recommended methodology. This is important because different professional links expose different blind spots. A data science may question whether the outcome can be predicted accurately. A commercial leader may ask whether prediction will lead to a useful intervention. A private equity investor may question whether the opportunity is large enough to affect enterprise value, and an operation leader may ask who will own the recommendation and how it will enter the workflow. None of these perspectives is sufficient alone. AI can help combine them. This is particularly powerful when you are entering an unfamiliar field. Suppose you are evaluating predictive maintenance, supply chain optimization, clinical analytics, or dynamic pricing for the first time. You may not know which question an expert would ask. Instead of pretending otherwise, make your lack of knowledge explicit. Ask AI to describe the landscape, the major methodology, the common failure modes, request evidence and terminology you need to understand. The point is not to become an expert in 10 minutes. The point is become informed enough to ask a better question and recognize a weak answer. Step 3. Let AI interview you. Normally, we ask AI questions. Sometimes, the more valuable approach is to reverse the process. Ask AI to interview you, one question at a time. But do not let it ask a random list of 20 questions. That usually creates the conversational equivalent of filling out a text form. Long, exhausted, and not practically useful. Instead, tell the AI to prioritize each question based on its potential impact on final decision. You can also give it a structured question framework to follow. This is especially useful when business teams are defining requirements for AI, machine learning, or data products. Better questions lead to the clear requirements, fewer misunderstandings, and the solutions that are more accurate, efficient, and relevant to the business problem. I have created another video that introduces a practical framework designed to help non-technical business professionals and teams define better AI, machine learning, and data product requirement. You can follow the video through that link above. A useful instruction would be, interview me about this initiative, one question at a time. Prioritize questions whose answer could change the problem definition, methodology, investment level, or implementation approach. When you identify a contradiction or unsupported assumption, challenge it directly. This works because many known unknowns remain unsolved simply because nobody forced the decision. The team says, we will decide that later. But later often means halfway through implementation after architecture, vendor selection, and stakeholder expectations have already hardened. During the interview, AI may ask, what specific decision should the solution improve? What action will someone take when the model produces an output? What's the cost of a false positive? What's the cost for the false negative? Who has authority to act? How quickly must the action happen? How will you know whether behavior changed? At some point, you will probably realize we have not actually decided that. The realization is not a failure, it's value. You have discovered uncertainty while it is still cheap. Step 4. Compare competing methodologies. Once the problem is clear, do not immediately ask AI for one recommendation. Ask for several fundamentally different approaches. For the customer retention example, you might ask AI to compare a predictive churn model, a causal analysis of churn drivers, a customer segmentation approach, a process redesign of retention operations, or an improvement to onboarding and product experience. Ask AI to compare each methodology based on the business value, its assumption, its data requirements, its implementation complexity, its time to value, its size of risks, its organizational requirements, and what evidence would support or reject. This is where AI can help you find the unknown methodology. Perhaps the team assume it need to predict which customer would leave, but the deeper issue may be identify which customer can be influenced. Prediction and influence are not the same thing. A customer may be highly likely to leave, but impossible to retain. Another customer may have moderate churn risk, but responds strongly to a specific intervention. A prediction methodology might identify risk. A causal methodology might identify action. The difference can determine whether the project produces a dashboard or create a measurable value. Step 5. Prototype what you cannot articulate. Some requirements cannot be discovered through the conversation. People often do not know what they want until they see the alternatives. This is especially true for unknown unknowns. Suppose you are designing an executive performance dashboard. The leadership team may say, we want something simple, strategic, and actionable. That sounds useful, but it is not. Simple compare with what? Strategic for whom? Actionable at which level? Instead of arguing over adjectives, ask AI to create several distinct prototypes. One version might organize information around financial outcomes. Another might focus on operational drivers. A third might focus exclusively on exceptions, risks, and recommend actions. Then ask leadership or stakeholder to react. What feels useful? What feels distracting? What's missing? Which information creates confidence? Which recommendation would they actually act on? Their reaction review criteria they could not articulate in advance. You can also use reference. If a team says, we want something similar to this report, give AI the report and ask it to identify the underlying structure. Do not ask it merely to copy the design. Ask AI to explain what principles make the example effective. Maybe it prioritizes decision rather than information. Maybe it separates the leading and the lagging indicator. Maybe it uses exceptions instead of overwhelming user with every metric human have managed to measure. Reference contain hidden standards. AI can help extract those standards and convert them into explicit design principle later. Step 6. Validate with evidence gates. Before moving from exploration into full implementation, define evidence gates. An evidence gate is a condition that must be satisfied before you invest further. Ask AI, what must be true for this methodology to work? Which assumption carries the greatest risk? What evidence would prove the proposed approach wrong? What's the fastest and cheapest way to test that assumption? Who needs to validate the conclusion? For an AI sales assistant, evidence gates might include salespeople spend enough time searching for information to justify intervention. The information they need exists and can be accessed reliably. Fast access actually improves the sales outcome. User will trust the recommendation. The assistant can fit into current workflow, and the expected value exceed implementation, integration, governance, and ongoing operation costs. AI can help design the test, but it should not be allowed to declare the test successful based on the elegance of its own presentation. Evidence determines whether the methodology survives. Section 5. Discovering unknowns during implementation. The process does not stop once implementation begins. Some unknowns only appear when you start working with real data, real users, and operational constraints. Imagine you begin building a recommendation engine. During implementation, you discovered that customers are assigned to multiple account owners. The CRM does not clear record which commercial actions were taken. Salespeople use private spreadsheet to manage important relationships, and the intervention process differs by region. It is tempting to label this as technical obstacles, but they may indicate something more important. Perhaps the organization is not ready for a recommendation engine. Perhaps the correct methodology is first to standardize the sales process and decision ownership. So whenever implementation becomes unexpected difficult, pause and ask AI, is this an implementation problem within the current methodology, or is it evidence that the methodology itself is wrong? Ask it to compare both interpretations. This is an important discipline. Teams often become emotionally attached to the original plan. They have presented to the leadership. They have proved the project. They have selected technology. They may even have created a project name and logo, which is apparently, when turned back, become legally impossible. But project plan is not a secret commitment. It's a hypothesis. And implementation generates new evidence. Use that evidence to update your map. Section 6. The counterintuitive lesson. The approach feels slower at the beginning. You are spending time asking questions, compare methodologies, review examples, and building prototypes. Isn't the point of AI to save time? Why not simply hand over the task and let it work? Because 10 minutes spent discovering an unknown can prevent 10 weeks spent implementing the wrong solution. Every interview is a cheap test. Every prototype is a cheap test. Every methodology comparison is a cheap test. Every challenge to assumption is a cheap test. The expensive moment is not when you ask one more question. The expensive moment is when hundreds of people begin to building, integrating, training, and reorganizing around an assumption that nobody validated. AI makes execution dramatically cheaper and faster now, but that creates a new danger. We can now produce incorrect work at extraordinary speed. The faster the execution engine becomes, the more important it is to point it in a right direction. Section 7. 3 rules to remember. Rule number 1. Separate exploration from execution. Create a phase where AI is not allowed to build the final solution. Its role is to investigate, challenge, compare, and reframe. Do not move into execution until you have selected a methodology deliberately. Rule number 2. Ask AI to disagree with you. Do not only ask AI to improve your idea. Ask what would make the idea fail. Ask which assumptions are unsupported. Ask what an experienced skeptic would challenge. Ask which alternative explanation also fits the evidence. If AI agrees with everything you said, it is not functioning as a thought partner. It is functioning as an unarticulate approval process. Rule number 3. Learn enough to judge the output. You do not need to become an expert in every field, but you need enough understanding to evaluate whether the AI work is good. When you enter an unfamiliar area, ask AI to teach you what good looks like, which terminology matters, what common mistake beginners make, which decisions are irrelevant, which trade-offs experts debate. The goal is not to do all the work yourself. The goal is to develop enough judgment to direct the work intelligently. Delegation without judgment is not leverage. It is gambling with better formatting. The bottleneck in AI-assisted work is shifting. It is no longer always the model capability to generate an answer. Increasingly, the bottleneck is our ability to identify what has not been said, what has not been decided, what is understood only implicitly, and what has not been considered. The strongest AI user will not simply write better prompts. They will use AI to expand their understanding before committing to a solution. They will ask AI to expose blind spots, extract hidden criteria, and compare competing methodologies. The biggest opportunity is not getting AI to think instead of you. It is use AI to show you where your own thinking is incomplete. If this video inspired you, give me a like and subscribe for more. Share it with someone you care. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.